Hey there. Have you heard about the bizarre dancing epidemic that struck the folks in Strasbourg back in 1518? It was wild, with many people dancing non-stop until they collapsed. This intriguing account comes from an old manuscript kept in the archives of Strasbourg, which was then part of the Holy Roman Empire. While I'm definitely no dance star myself, thankfully my two left feet haven't caused anyone any harm. Yet. So, what really went down in Strasbourg that led to such a staggering phenomenon? Let's take a journey back in time to explore the mysteries of the dancing plague of 1518. Welcome to History Madness. The strange events kicked off on July 14, 1518, just a week before the holy festival of Mary Magdalene. It was a scorching summer day when Frau Trofea stepped out of her charming half-timbered house and started to dance. But this wasn't your typical joyful dance. Her movements appeared jerky and uncoordinated, jumping awkwardly from foot to foot. Despite her husband's pleas for her to come inside, she continued dancing throughout the day, and as the sun set, a curious crowd began to gather, realizing that she just couldn't stop. After hours of relentless dancing and drenched in sweat, Frau Trofea finally collapsed from exhaustion and caught a brief nap. Yet when the sun rose the next day, she picked up right where she left off and even danced on into a third day, despite her feet being bruised and bloodied by then. The crowd grew larger, consisting of people from all walks of life, from ragged beggars to finely dressed nobles, all speculating about what could possibly be causing this. At first, many thought she might just be putting on a show to annoy her husband, who wasn't a fan of dancing. Swiss physician Paracelsus even suggested that she was acting out due to some disagreement with him just before she began her unusual performance. Blood on the dance floor. Some locals even suspected she might have been possessed. Perhaps her sins had left her vulnerable to wicked spirits. In 16th century beliefs, women were often considered more susceptible to witchcraft, as they were thought to have a more lustful nature, leading to perceived weakness in morals and mind. After 4 long days of continuous dancing, with her shoes soaked in blood and her face twisted with pain, it was decided that Frau Trofea needed to be punished by a saint residing nearby. Without much ceremony, she was loaded onto a wagon and taken to the shrine of Saint Vitus in the Vosges Mountains, leading to her affliction being referred to as Saint Vitus's dance. This unusual spectacle was so remarkable that it was documented by many from the community, including local officials, preachers, and merchants. In just days, more people joined the dance in Strasbourg, all responding to an overwhelming urge to move. In the span of a month, reports indicated that around 400 people were part of this unusual dance party, some in shoes, others in clogs, and many just barefoot, dancing with wild abandon and ignoring the toll it was taking on their bodies. Sadly, some began losing their lives. The exact number is unclear, but accounts suggest that as many as 15 people died each day due to dehydration and exhaustion in the summer heat. The mayhem gradually lessened by late August, leaving many in Strasbourg shaken and mourning the loss of loved ones. Everybody dance now. Interestingly, this wasn't the first account of a dancing plague. In 1017, residents of Kolbig, now in Germany, were said to have danced uncontrollably in a graveyard after being cursed by an angry priest to keep dancing for an entire year. The truth behind this tale is a bit murky, but it serves as an interesting anecdote about the potential consequences of revelry in medieval times. Another tale arises from historian Gerald of Wales, who in 1188 shared a story of an annual ceremony held at St. Aldermar's Church in South Wales, where attendees gathered to sing and dance until they collapsed, later pretending to perform chores they'd neglected during the week. They appeared entranced, behavior that mirrors the bizarre dancing frenzy of 1518. There's also the case in 1247 in the German town of Erfurt, where around 100 children danced blissfully out of town before collapsing into a deep sleep. Unfortunately, some lost their lives before being discovered by their worried parents, while the survivors dealt with lasting fatigue and convulsions. Many historians believe this incident might also relate to the dancing plague phenomena, possibly inspiring the legendary tale of the Pied Piper of Hamelin. Not long after Erfurt's incident, the city of Maastricht experienced its own dance disaster. In 1278, dancers merrily twirled onto a bridge, which ultimately collapsed and tragically killed everyone involved, perceived as divine punishment by the Church. A significant outbreak occurred in the late 14th century, affecting the Rhineland from Ghent to Strasbourg. In the summer of 1374, groups of wild dancers traveled from town to town, spreading their frenzy like a contagious disease. Thousands were caught up in the chaos, crying out for divine mercy as they danced in pain. Witnesses claimed the dancers were convinced they would die if they didn't keep sheets tightly bound around their waists, a dynamic thought to indicate possession. So, how did Frau Trofea's erratic dancing snowball into this enormous epidemic? Some historians have suggested the dancers may have been inflicting pain upon themselves, similarly to how flagellants whipped themselves during the Black Death, believing suffering to be a path to penitence. The physicians of the time theorized that it was due to a physical ailment caused by overheating blood, dismissing any supernatural influences. Their proposed remedy? You guessed it, more dancing. They thought that heavy sweating would help cool the blood, despite the undeniable reality of heart attacks and strokes resulting from the extreme exertion. The summer before the outbreak brought famine, skyrocketing grain prices, and countless deaths from starvation, creating a heavily stressed population. Subsequently, smallpox and plague hit, leaving dead bodies on the streets, with those still alive desperately seeking prayers and masses in hopes of appeasing an angry God. With anxiety levels at an all-time high, could this dancing mania have been a form of mass hysteria? This type of phenomenon occurs when a group of individuals begins to show physical symptoms of illness under stress without any real contagion. The Salem witch trials serve as a well-documented example, as did the more recent Tanganyika laughter epidemic in 1962, which involved over 1,000 students, overwhelmed by exam pressures. Considering the intense religious culture of the time and the backdrop of famine and death, it's plausible that the conditions were ripe for mass psychogenic illness. After all, many people began dancing merely by observing others in distress. It's difficult to fathom how individuals could push through the pain and dance for days on end with bloody feet, unless they were under some altered mental state. Another popular theory among historians points to ergot poisoning, which occurs when a mold on damp rye is ingested through contaminated bread. This can lead to hallucinations, burning sensations, and convulsions. However, it doesn't quite explain the rhythmic and continuous dancing described in historical records. Overall, evidence suggests these medieval dancing plagues were likely cases of mass psychosis brought on by a history of hardship, fear, and intense religious fervor. The dancing plague of 1518 remains one of the most bizarre chapters in European history. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of History Madness. I hope you enjoyed it. And remember to stay hydrated if you decide to hit the dance floor.